You ever have one of those nights where you're bone tired, but your mind's running 100 miles an hour because you know deep down something you do tonight is going to change everything? That was me, 5 a.m., in a freezing Jersey airplane hangar, hands numb, eyes burning, staring at the guts of a $38 million Gulfstream G650. Not my jet, obviously belonged to Harrison Reed, some big shot CEO who probably made more before breakfast than my grandma did all year teaching second grade. But I was the one under the hood, a black kid in borrowed coveralls, fixing what every so-called expert at Atlantic Executive Aviation said couldn't be fixed. Yeah, that happened. See, while other kids played video games, I was the weird one obsessed with flight simulators and old repair manuals. That's how I spotted the problem a software calibration glitch straight out a 1994 manual, not the actuator everybody else wanted to replace. I'm not saying I'm a genius, but when you've spent your life being underestimated, you learn to trust your gut. So there I was, running on coffee fumes, doing emergency surgery on an airplane that was supposed to be grounded for a week. The hangar doors slid open and in walked Reed, all-tailored suit and Wall Street confidence, like he'd never missed a night's sleep in his life. He stared at me, then at the jet, and I could see that look, the one that says, "Wait, you fix my plane? Where's Davidson or Merrick?" Like I was just a help, you know? But I told him plane's good to go. He didn't even hide the skepticism. And then he saw the necklace, I always wear me grandfather's silver pilot wings. That's when things got weird. "Where'd you get those?" he asked, voice gone soft. I told him they were my grandfather's. Joseph Wilson used to fly with the Tuskegee Airmen. And suddenly, Mr. Billionaire CEO's hands are shaking. "Your grandfather saved my father's life over Germany," he whispers. I'm thinking, is this for real? Turns out, my granddad fighting Nazis abroad, fighting racism at home flew cover for Reed's dad's bomber in '44. Saved him from being shot out of the sky. Now, decades later, his grandson is fixing that man's kid's jet in the middle of the night. You can't make this stuff up. 12 hours earlier, I'd barely made it off a rain-soaked tarmac after a brutal shift. Was headed home to cram for my FAA exam, trying to make it out of the apprentice program and into a real mechanic's job. Then Davidson, the boss, yells for me, "Emergency, Reed's G650's down, big client, everybody stays." Only everybody was me, the two white apprentices with family connections, Davidson and Merrick, who thought the apprentice program was just a charity case. We spent hours poking and prodding that jet. Merrick, loving every chance to flex, finally declares the actuator's toast. Gotta order parts from Switzerland, plane's grounded. But the pattern, the vibration, the way the damage spread, I knew it was a calibration issue, exactly like one I'd seen in an old simulator program. I tried to speak up. Merrick cut me off. I'm not risking a $38 million jet on some teenager's science project. Davidson, though, looked at me like maybe, just maybe, this kid sees something. Gave me the green light to try off the clock. No support, but still. Alone in the hangar, surrounded by metal and memory, I pulled out Grandpa's wings and got to work. I thought about everything he went through, how he never even got to fly commercially after the war because of the color of his skin, how he kept going, kept fixing planes, kept his dignity. That night, I felt him there. "All right, Grandpa, help me figure this out." 7 hours later, bleary-eyed but sure, I'd traced the fault to a corrupted software parameter. Manual recalibration, code tweaks, fingers crossed, system check was clean. Plane could fly. Then Reed showed up, and after the wings, the story, the photo of our grandfathers together in World War III, realized this was bigger than one night or one job. Reed thanked me, real gratitude in his voice, then called in Davidson and Merrick. Watched as the senior mechanics tried to figure out how a kid with no pedigree had done what they couldn't. When Reed said, "I want Mr. Wilson on my aircraft from now on, whatever training he needs, Pinnacle pays," and stared down Davidson until he agreed, I saw years of closed doors swing open. But the real twist wasn't just me getting a shot. Turns out there was a whole backstory. My granddad and Reed's dad, after the war, Reed tried to fund a flight school for black pilots, make right what the world had gotten so wrong. Grandpa turned him down, said it would put a target on his family, but they stayed in touch, letters, plans, disappointments. My grandma never talked about it. Guess there are wounds you just bury. That afternoon, Reed called me into his Manhattan office. Not to glow at ask about my family, my dreams, what's like trying to make it as a kid from Atlantic City. He offered me a scholarship-full ride, college, guaranteed job. Not as charity, not out of guilt, but because his words, "You have the kind of mind we need in this industry." I wanted to say yes. Who wouldn't? But something in my grandma's warnings about debts, about pride and power, made me slow down. So I went to Philly, tracked down my great-uncle Calvin, me granddad's brother nobody talked about. He told me about the fallout in '69, how Grandpa chose quiet survival, Calvin chose protest. How Harrison Reed, back in the day, had fought against partnering with Grandpa, saw it as a business risk, not a moral debt. "You want this opportunity?" Calvin said. "Take it, but don't be anyone's poster boy. Make sure it serves you too." So I negotiated. When I met Reed again, I brought a counteroffer terms about my story, my image, my privacy, and most important, 5 more scholarships for other kids like me, with me helping pick the winners. Reed actually smiled, said my grandfather would be proud. That's how I ended up at MIT 3 years later, developing systems that changed the way jets fly, mentoring kids from neighborhoods like mine, and still wearing those silver wings. And the crazy part? Turns out my Uncle James, the quiet accountant, had been an Air Force pilot too. Saved Reed's grandson's life in the '90s, wore those same wings. Our families have been circling each other for generations, sometimes helping, sometimes hurting, always complicated. You know what I think? Legacy's not about the stories people tell at banquets, or even the ones they try to hide. It's about how you take what you're given a pain, the pride, the burden, and turn it into something new. I could have let Merrick's sneers get in my head. I could have backed down when the system said, "Wait your turn." But I kept going, not just for me, but for everyone who never got the shot I did. So that's my story. A night in a cold hangar, a silver set of wings, and a chance that changed my life and maybe, just maybe, started to change the system. I'm still figuring out what to do with all that history, but one thing's for sure, I won't let anyone else define my legacy or use it as a prop. I make my own choices now. And if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or just plain tired of waiting for someone else to do right by you, well, maybe it's time to pick up your own set of wings and show them how it's done. So what do you think? Was I right to take the deal, to push for more? Or did I just become another story for them to use? Tell me, how would you have handled it? Because in the end, the only justice we get is the kind we fight for ourselves.